Peace and greeting, family. I'm Brother Yusiku L. I used to operate the Ring and Stone Network. Over the weekend, I've been looking and listening to some YouTubes on brothers and sisters building on trust and that debate of should you have a trust and what type of trust you have. So, what I wanted to do was give some information that I have learned about trust. I'm not as an authority but as someone that's contributing to us seeking the real truth. So, what I want to do is I want to start with um, were you born in a trust? Or at some point when your mother or father signed your certificate of live birth, were you put in a trust? So, we're going to start right here at it's a federal statutes at large. I love law. Um, Volume 49, Chapter 531, and it's Section 205, and it goes as follows. Um, Section 205A. Out of the sums appropriate pursuant to Section 501 of each fiscal year, the Secretary of Labor shall allocate to each state $20,000 and such part of the 1.8 million as he finds that the sum of the number of live births in such state bore to the total number of live births in the United States in the latest calendar year for which the Bureau of the Census has available statistics. And out of the sums appropriated pursuant to 501 for each fiscal year, the Secretary of Labor shall allot to the states $980,000 in addition to allotments made under subsection A, accordingly to the financial needs of each state for assistance in carrying out its state plan as determined by him after taking into consideration the number of live births in such states. So what happens is from the moment, family, that you are born, they start allocating money, and those monies that they allocate are for investments into a trust. And this is volume 49 was after 48, and 48 was, where this House Joint Resolution, which 48, volume 48, chapter 48 is basically House Joint Resolution. So all I want to do is to help this to sink in. I'm going to post a flow chart so you can see how these things flow with this live birth and these monies. And then I'll take you deeper into um, 49,531 to show you the investments. I'll show you the orders for the investments. I'll show you the orders for allocating money. And within there, I'll show you the Social Security Board, which ultimately transitioned to a board of trustees. So I'll put the flow chart up for us, and I'm going to reread um, that particular section again. It says Section 502. Out of the sums appropriated pursuant to Section 501 for each fiscal year, the Secretary of Labor shall allocate to each state $20,000 and such part of the 1.8 million as he finds that the number of live births in such state or the total number of live births in the United States in the latest calendar year for which the Bureau of the Census has available statistics. And out of the sums appropriated pursuant to Section 501 for each fiscal year, the Secretary of Labor shall allocate to the states $950,000 in addition to the allocations made in Section A, accordingly to the financial need of each state for assisting in carrying out the state plan as determined by him after taking into consideration the number of live births in such states. So, family, what I'm basically saying is in the flow chart is you see there's a state and then there's your state and then it contracts with this labor and then you'll see there's a seller, there's a depositor, And remember the indentured trustee in the flow chart. So that's how that birth certificate starts to flow for it to get to some forms of investment. And so we have to consider that it's not illegal what they're doing. It's just we don't understand what they're doing. And it's very important to keep in mind that there's two maxims of trust that they use. One is a trust can't fail for lack of a trustee, and the other is you can be put in a trust in the United States and not know it. So when you look at the flow chart, so far they put you in the trust, or so far we've gotten to the point that we know that once you sign a birth certificate, there could be in excess of $2 million that immediately moves like that. So what I'm doing, I'm gonna do the volume 49. I'm gonna put it up again. We're going to go to another section, and that section we're going to read about investment, and that section shall be um, section 201. Give me a minute, family, because it takes me a while to. This is kind of small, and it takes me a while to see uh, what's going on with it. Uh, bear with me. There we go. Section 201, like so. So section 201 reads as follow. Um, there is thereby created an account in the Treasury of the United States to be known as the Old Age Reserve Account. Hereafter, in this title called account, they're hereby authorized to be appropriated to the account for each physical year, beginning with the physical year of June 30th, 1937, an amount sufficient as an annual premium to provide for the payments required under this title. The amount to be determined on the reserve basis in accordance with accepted principles and based upon such tables of morality as the Secretary of Treasury shall from time to time adopt, and upon an interest rate of 3% per year, compounded annually. The Secretary of Treasury shall submit annually to the Bureau of the budget, which is now the Bureau of Public Debt, which is now Physical Services, an estimate of the appropriations to be made to the account. And it shall be the duty of the Secretary of Treasury to invest such portions of the amount credited to the account as is not, in his judgment, required to meet the current withdrawals. Such investments may be made only in the interest bearing obligations of the United States or in obligations granted as both principals and interests of the United States. So you see what I'm saying, family? At some point when you're born, they move a couple $1 million. Then they decide that at birth, while you're in the hospital, they're going to get you an old age count, and they call it the account, but it's a trust. And this trust is invested by whom? The trustee of the trust, which is the Secretary of Treasury. And it's very sophisticated. And so, once again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up this flow chart because that's going to give us another layer within how this money moves. You see, this money moves a certain way, and they're like, and it's the same as the way money moves, even if you went and got a forensic audit. So it's not a conspiracy to it. It's just that's how they do it. There's always going to be a servicer. There's going to be the seller. There's always going to be the depositor. And then there's going to be a trustee at the end, entry trustee. And you see down in the flow chart, at some point, there's even a place where they attach a CUSIP number to your birth certificate. So we just have to watch out for some of the things they do. So we're going to skip to section 904, and that section 904 will will talk a little bit more about how they invest this money for you, and then we'll finish up with me a minute here. Gotta get it. It takes a while. Here we go. It takes a while because it's important to establish the who is your trustee and uh, do you have a trust? Now we know that they move money when you're born. We knew they established these accounts. We kind of know that the Secretary of Treasury is the would be considered in the flow chart the indigent trustee. He's the managing trustee. And so what happens is the importance of this is understanding your status. So at birth, when that birth certificate is signed, that baby's status is immediately changed because then he's put into a trust that's managed by the Secretary of Treasury. However, that trust technically is in default. So I got up 904, so we'll look at 904. Um, and this is supposedly the unemployment trust fund. So now we're starting to get into words that we're more familiar with because now they're saying, oh, yeah, there's a trust fund. It is thereby established by the Treasury of the United States a trust fund to be known as the Unemployment Trust Fund. Hereafter in this title called the fund. And the Secretary of Treasury is authorized and directed to receive and hold the funds of all money deposited therein by the state agency from a state agency's unemployment funds. Such deposits to be made directly to the Secretary of Treasury or with any Federal Reserve Bank or member bank of the Federal Reserve System designated by him for such purpose. And it shall be the duty of the Secretary of Treasury to invest such portions of the fund as is not, in his judgment, required to meet the current withdrawals. Such investments may be made only in interest bearing obligations of the United States or in obligations guaranteed as to both principal and interest by the United States. For such purpose, such obligations may be required on original issue at par or two for purchase of outstanding obligations at the market price. The purpose of such obligations of the United States may be issued under the Second Liberty Bond Act as amended or thereby extended to authorize the issuance of par of special obligations exclusively for the fund. So what we have now in this volume, all within this one law, is that they established a trust fund, for the people, supposedly for the people. I'll just say that they established these trust funds, and they're operating them all the time for the people, supposedly when we retire, you know, or if we ever get to retire, they operate these trust funds. They're these ongoing trust funds. So when you look at the debate of were we born into a trust, basically almost 3 days after you were born, then you put into a trust fund. You know what I mean? Me, I'm an older gentleman. So it used to be you had to wait for your social security card. You didn't get it till you were 16 when you can work. But nowadays, because they want to speed things up, basically when the child is born, once that birth certificate is signed, then they give them a social security number. So what I want to do is like that particular law, I'm gonna put this particular flow chart up again because we want to take a look at it. So that law, what happens is when you look at that law, you'll see that when you go around to your right and back down, you'll see I added again that it's a master servicer. And that particular law, when the state is giving money back to the federal government, when they begin to get money at the beginning of it, they're getting over $2 million per baby, roughly, and now they're giving some money back through the unemployment, which is basically some of the taxes that come out your check. See, so the state, there's a debate about the role of the state. within it, some brothers like to deal exclusively with the state. I know some brothers that, like me, I like to deal with federal. I prefer law opposed to state codes. But when you look at it, there the state is at some point a master servicer. They maintains those birth certificates. You get um, your birth certificate you order from the state. But once the state receives that money from the labor, the Department of Labor, then they contract really they right away when the state receives that money. And there's more grants within this particular law, but I just wanted to focus on the ones that involve um, trust and investment. You see what I mean? And because those are important. So next we're going to go to section 700, which section 700 deals with the board of trustees. And that's that's an interesting one within itself too. So we'll skip to 700 now. And hopefully I'm going slow enough where it could be explained later. But Section 700 deals with your board of trustees and where this board comes from. So Section 701, there is hereby established a Social Security Board. Now the name has been changed to a Board of Trustees. In this act referred to as the board, it is comprised of three members to be appointed by the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. And during his term of membership on this board, no member shall engage in any other business, vocation, or employment. Not more than two of the members of the board shall be members of the same political party. Each member shall receive a salary or rate of $10,000 a year and shall hold office for a term of 6 years, except one, any member appropriate to fill the vacancy occurring prior to the expiration of the term for which his predecessor was appointed. So to make it neat, then they created a Social Security board, family. You know what I mean? And they call it a board, but when you go to the history, like you go to the Social Security board and you look at the history of the board of trustees and the public trustee positions of the Social Security, like that, you find that um, they have a board of trustees, and the managing trustee is the secretary of treasury. So you see how it kind of it's all taken. So we go from the law where they created these boards and these organizations and these trust funds, right? And then in their history, they tell you that it the secretary or your social security is like they say here. You see at the top, they say it's a trust fund. Now keep in mind, anytime they say trust in the United States or board of trustees, you have a trustee. There's somebody that's a grantor, there's somebody that's a trustee, and there's somebody that definitely has to be a beneficiary. The thing about um, the way that they're swinging it is that what they're doing is when your particular parent doesn't get your status right as a child, or when you as a parent doesn't get your child's status right within 90 days of their birth, then you get this. The board controls your trust fund. Now remember I told you earlier, you can be put in a trust and not know it. And the second maxim is that a trust can't fail for lack of trustee. So when your parents or when you, like me, it took me a while to get the status of my daughter right, right? But when you don't get the status of your child right, then the managing trustee take over and he runs the board for you like that. He runs it all, basically. So what we want to do is now that we've established that you're born in the trust, maybe at some point you should learn how to manage that trust or communicate, with the people that run your trust beyond waiting till you get 65 and then you apply for some trust funds where they put maybe $2 million in an account for you at birth. Um, but what I want to move to is what type of trust, because it's very important that when you establish a trust, um, you should know what type of trust you should originally start off with. And I'm not saying you limit it to this, because trust me, there's thousands of different type of trusts, and you should design a trust based on your needs and your spiritual growth, your monetary growth. But I find that originally, um, there's one type of trust you should start out with. So I'm going where we're going now is I went to the website of the government printing office. We went to the help section, and we went there to define public and private. And it's important that we wanted to make sure that people understand public and private. Hopefully, it's coming up so I can read it. Here, give me a minute. It wants to act crazy now. Come on, you. Anyway, but basically, what it says when you go into the help and define public and private, they define what is public lie, and also like the government printing office is the printing office that prints all laws that come out of Congress. So like this is not like a hearsay site. This is a site where if the law come off like that, then this is where you can go to get the law. And it's a great reference site for when you're studying law, where you can go get information about law, or you can go find laws, you can go find the history of laws, and you don't have to pay money for it first. So it's a great site there, to lock in to go there when you're doing some work, research work for you, which hopefully you go and check it out. But it talks about public and private law, and it tells you basically um, what is public law, what is private law, why one uh, you want to deal with and one you don't. But my thing with it is, as you read it, is that when you start doing private trust and looking at private law, you find that our Congress has like two sides to it. It has this public side and it has this private side. But it goes on to state that private law and private trust is for the remedy of the individual small groups, and that's very important. You know, um, once again, so to start a trust, you want your trust at some point to be able to give you some form of remedy, um, change your status, and give you some form of remedy. So I find dealing in private law is better, and having a private trust is better. So that's you can get from the government printing office website, and that'll that'll help you. So you start off with your private trust. You learn how to grow with your trust, and you let it be your shield. You have your private trust, and you let that private trust be your shield. So any encounters you have from day to day, or questions you have, you should run privately. I know personally, for me, this year I wanted to buy my daughter a car, and I called the bank and told them to take X amount of dollars out my private bank account and transfer it to my public bank account. And she told me she couldn't do it. And I'm like, what? And she was like, no, we can't go into your private account. So I had to come to the bank and transfer the money out myself into my public account. And then she let me buy that car. And so I'm a proponent of a private account, private bank accounts, private trust, and then you grow all your trusts off your private, all your companies, let them come off your private trust. That's what, I believe. But anyway, I'm babbling. I'm going to go. But that's what I want. Yes, family, I'm babbling a bill. But I'm going to try to make this short because there's one more particular company within the flow chart that plays a major role in the investment from the day that we're born. And that company deals with the depository trust company. And within the depository company, trust company, there is what they call seed and company. And seed and company, um, they're a major player because when you invest, then you kind of sign your company over to a seed. So seed and company is a shorthand for the phrase certificate depository. Appropriately, The word seed means give up power or territory because the investors give up their stock and companies give up their shareholders to an intermediate. And what I found what was so amazing about this December that Seed owns 83% of all stock in the United States. And the other 17% of stock issued is owned directly by registered stockholders, whatever, through the direct registration system. But however, the point was that 83% of all stock, 83% of all companies. So at the beginning of this presentation, when we talked about investing and the Secretary of Treasury investing with obligations and hiring things, then ultimately the legal title to your birth certificate or your child being signed away or you being signed away, then the legal title is owned by seed. There is a beneficiary title that you can study and try to learn how to, you know, um, deal with your beneficiary title because you do have some rights or you wouldn't have the beneficiary title. And that's another reason why it's so important that you understand and learn trust because of the word the beneficiary title within the depository trust company. I mean, you have some rights, but the legal title to your birth certificate is being traded. And with the help of some heady people, you can find out every day, you know, where how you're being traded and where you made money that day or whether your stock fell off. But I thought it's important that we know that. We know once again I'm gonna put up this flow chart so you understand that, that this is how things flow with that birth certificate. The names of the companies may change. You may hear some people debate about whether the law has been changed or not, but it hasn't changed. They just kind of admitted to change the name of the companies. Like if a department changes, for instance, um, the Bureau of Public Debt, they didn't change to being physical services. So then they have to change the law in terms of the wording, but in terms of the trust and that you being in the trust and how those trusts is operated and who is the managing trustee and what does the Department of Labor do, um, why they call it human services when you go down to try to get a job from a particular company. They're kind of all tied to the beginning of this law because there's an estimate of how much money they're going to put into those trust accounts for the people. With that, I definitely wish positive energy for everybody and get you copy or several copies of the United States Constitution and also attach Title One, United States Code 112 and 113 with it. Um, After what has taken place in South Carolina, if there was martial law, um, Title One, 112, and 113 says that you can have a constitutional hearing, even in martial law. So it's something to keep with you. In your bug out bag. Have your important papers. I mean, we got caught off guard. You know what I mean? And it was interesting. It was a learning experience. Definitely was a learning experience. And I'm sorry, so many people have lost their lives and so many people have lost their property. You know what I mean? But uh, it's a thing. Even for me, knowing what goes on in Wahini, I was definitely caught off guard too. My daughter and I, but we learned. With that, I'm signing off. Peace and love, and good luck with your search on trying to get your status together.